Hey everyone, I'm Rachel. I'm a pattern maker and technical designer, and I'm going to take you through just some really basic Accumark 8.5 stuff. So Accumark 8.5 is actually kind of an older program, and you'll see I have it on this Windows 8 computer. It's pretty old, but this program is still the program I've used at a lot of places, even though it's been in action for at least 10 years. It does seem to be a program that's pretty widely used. And I think part of that is just upgrading. Gerber programs can be very costly, which is why I haven't upgraded yet. And in the end, I think what you get, I think the newer Gerber programs, you have the additional add-ons of like 3D. But if you're not using that actively, then honestly, I think probably 8.5 or version 9 will be pretty comparable to what you're seeing in the newer versions. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but if you do have an opinion about which version of Gerber you use and you prefer, please leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear from all of you out there and what you're using for pattern making. So what I do like about Accumark is I do feel like it's really well set up for kind of like fashion industry stuff. I feel like it was really built for fashion industry. In some ways, it's like not that great of a process, and they sort of like digitized a process that maybe could have been improved, but now it's just digital. But in other ways, it does fit into the process pretty easily, and it's used at a lot of big brands. So it's a great program to have in your tool belt if you are interested in becoming a pattern maker. So I'll just show you a few things. So you have all these little folders that you create on your C drive when you have Accumark, and they give you this digitizer folder, which if you had a digitizer, this is where your digitizing files would go. And then they also give you this data 90, which is like a bunch of kind of like basic pattern blocks you could use. It also comes with some curves, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead, I press shift, and I'm going to right click, open with pattern design, and I'm going to open with active work area. If you open in a separate work area, it would open each of these curves in a different window, but I want to open them all together. So I will show you what they look like. So I've been a pattern maker now for, 12, 13, something, more than 10 years in the industry, and I've been using Accumark for, about as long. I recently learned Tech and Optitex also, and I've also learned Clo 3D, so I'm trying to work that into my process and see if I can figure out how to get 3D renders to really give me a good read on what my patterns are going to look like, and hopefully reduce sampling. We'll see. I'm still kind of early in the process, and I haven't quite determined how accurate that read is. But if any of you out there are big Clo users or other 3D pattern making program users, I would love to hear from you. Leave me a comment. Let me know, if you use Clo or another program and how you find it works for you. All right, so this is Pattern Design version 9. I realized that in the beginning I said this was version 8.5. I forgot. This one is version 9. It's still really old, but it's pretty similar to 8.5. There's just a few menu changes. On the whole, it's very comparable. So these are the little curves that come with Accumark. So if you are one of those people who feels very strongly that you need a curve to create good shapes, you can use these curves. They're pretty easy, and they look very nice. To be honest, I find that once you've been doing this a while, you kind of get an idea of the shape that you want to create, and I think it's easier just to create it than to use the curve. But you could copy a line and drag it over. So I do sometimes do that, and I'll show you how I do that. All right, so let's make like a really basic kind of pattern. Let's see here. I'll just kind of show you how I do things. Actually, let's start with this pant block. I don't know what this is, but I'm going to find out. And I'm going to open it in a separate work area. So here we go. I'm sorry, this computer is, as I said, a very old computer. So that is why it runs so slowly. Okay, this is a pretty weird pattern. I definitely wouldn't have, yeah, pretty unusual. So one thing that is kind of annoying about Accumark is if you have, it doesn't really allow you to zoom in or zoom out with your scrolling. Sometimes it does. Oh, I just did it. It's like a little glitch in the system. I found that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I've gotten really used to the hotkeys F7 and F8, and that kind of zooms in or zooms out. F4, oops, F4 will bring one back into the screen. So if you lose your pieces for some reason, or you zoom way out or zoom way back in, you just press F4 and it recenters one of the pieces for you so you can kind of get back to where you are. And then I'm going to press F8 to zoom out just a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to drag this guy here. Okay, so when I'm dragging, just a quick kind of, just so you understand. So with this program, you're going to click with your left click, the normal click that you would use for a mouse, and then you can move it around as you please. And one thing you'll notice, there's this button here. This is the geometry button. And what the geometry button does is it makes the pattern snap to itself. So you'll see it snapped there. If I turn off the geometry button, it doesn't snap anymore. So it's a little bit harder for me to quite align those lines. So if you are trying to align something, you want to turn on the geometry button. And if you aren't, because sometimes there are times that you want to make the lines a little bit different and you don't want them to snap to each other, then you just turn that off. You can also use the grid line or the grid snap to grid. I almost never use this, but you could use it. You know, if you want to line everything up with some particular point. I just find that for the most part, I'm more interested in having my pieces match each other and then having them match the grid. I'm going to turn that off. And precision, you know, I'm not really sure exactly what that is. I never use that one. I'm not sure what it's doing. I feel like it's just slowing down my computer. Okay, I'm going to turn it off. Again, so I'll show you these menus down here too. So you can show your grid or hide your grid. I really like having my grid on, and I have it set to 1-inch blocks. I believe these should be 1-inch blocks, but I will check that out. I like a 1-inch block. It just, you know, this, I'm going to be honest, these do not look like 1-inch blocks, but I usually set my grid to 1-inch blocks, and then that way I can just kind of, you know, as I'm making pattern changes, if I know I want to move it about a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch, you can eyeball it and get it pretty close, and that does help keep me on path. I would say a lot of people don't like the noise of a grid, so if you prefer to have it off, you know, that's perfectly normal. And of course you can hide your seams here. Looks like this pattern does not have seams, so it doesn't matter. But if it did have seams, and I will show you how to add them really quickly. Ooh, I'm not used to this menu. Modify. So this is the new thing about Pattern Design version 9, is they put everything by like what stage of creation you're in rather than grouped together by point, piece. So it is a little confusing to me. Let's see here, maybe it'd be create. Create? Boy, I have no idea. Oh man, this is really annoying. I'm going to have to, oh, there it is, define seam. Okay, so these little icons here, I actually set up, and these I saved as you can save this file, all these little icons, so you can bring these with you. Like let's say you use this program at home and at work and you want to have your menus set up the exact same way. You can save these little icon arrangements, and then that way you can kind of, like, I really love using the buttons. I just find that it's like really easy to know where everything's at. So I'm going to select these two with my left select, and then I'm going to right click OK. And now you'll see over here in the user input, this basically tells you what you're going to do next. So what I'm going to do next, it says enter seam allowance. I'm going to give it 1/2 inch. I'm going to, okay. And there it is, 1/2 inch. Oh, you know what? that is a 1-inch grid. This is just an enormous pant, I guess. It's a very large pant. Very confusing. Either that or I have this on metric system. Let's find out. Okay, so I'm gonna measure a line and I'll just see, this will tell me. Line length. Let's zoom out so I can see. Okay, so that's it. So I have it on the metric system right now, so this is probably why everything is a little bit funky for me. Because I'm in the United States, I do use inches. I know that's not what everybody else uses, but yeah, I'll have to figure out. Here we go. User environment, that's where I'm going to change to be. Sorry, this is a little bit slow. But this will explain why the pant out seam is 113. I will say, looking at this pant pattern, while I'm waiting for my computer to catch up, I would say, on the whole, oh, it's not working. All right, I may have to come back to this. So we're just gonna work in metric system for a while. I would say the big thing that I'm noticing with this pant pattern is that it seems like the rises are really shallow to me. And I don't know if this is supposed to be a men's pant pattern or a women's pant pattern, but let me align them and then I can show you what I feel like I mean. So I'm gonna select flip piece and then I'm gonna flip it. So it says select pieces to flip. So I'm gonna flip the back. And then I'm gonna select that I want it to flip, which quadrant you want it to flip, over the y-axis, kitty corner of that, or horizontally, basically. So I'm gonna do this. There we go. Okay. And this is a great use of the geometry. So I'm gonna slide and select that point, and then align it there. And now I'm gonna, well, I'll leave this here for a moment. Just gonna, sorry. Let's see here, where is the rotate button? Rotate piece. Okay, so I selected that piece. So one thing about rotate is you do want to select, I always like to use a reference location. So first you're going to select the piece to rotate, click OK, and then you're going to select where it's rotating about, and then you're going to select a reference point. And then it'll just drag and click. And then when you're done with this, you're going to right click, OK. And that'll get you out of the menu. You can see it's still active, like I could now rotate this piece, but if you're done with this, then you can just click cancel, and then it'll close out. Otherwise, you'll end up keep rotating things, so that'll be annoying. So the big thing I'm noticing is, like, first off, I can see it looks like the front and the back rises here are almost exactly the same. It's kind of weird. I mean, when you think about it, most people, I mean, every body shape is different, but for the most part, I think human anatomy, if this is your inseam, and this is the center of your body, and this is the space between your legs, you're going to need more space in the back. And this is the back rise. You can tell because of the double notch. So I would typically, and I'll just draw a line to show you, this is the 2-point curve. Okay, so I'm going to select here. And I don't honestly use this tool a lot, so please stay with me. Oh, not what I thought it was going to be. I'm going to try this again. 2-point curve. All right, so I'm going to select here, and then I'm going to select there, and then I'm just going to, this might be a good opportunity to turn off the geometry, and then I can kind of like play with it. So in my mind, most people have more fullness in the back, and most people have more fullness and it's kind of like lower, right? So I feel like this isn't quite exactly the shape that I would make it, but let's start here. This is a good place to start. So this way you're getting a much bigger scoop out. The other thing that I often find with pants is that this length needs to be longer because of course you have more shape there. So often you'll want your front rise to be shorter in comparison to your back. For maybe someone whose size like 4 to 10, that difference might be a ½ inch. And I'm not talking about the length of the front rise compared to the back, but maybe more like the height from here to there. So I would want to see this be about a ½ inch shorter than the back rise. So they wouldn't really meet eye to eye. When you looked at it like this front would be shorter, maybe even more if it's a curvy person. It really depends on their body type. I would say a lot of times it seems like more people have more front rise length than they need, and they get like sort of an excess, and then they don't have enough back rise length, and then it kind of goes, it gets pulled in or pulled into their interior inseam. So so that is something I look at when I talk about front and back rise balance. This pant is very bizarre too because it's totally straight. So this would be a pant that's like kind of like a dirndl, a very sort of a loose woven pant that you would put elastic at the top, so you get a lot of gathers around the waistline. Yeah, but otherwise, you know, it's not a terrible start. From this viewpoint, you know, pants are pretty simple, but the hard part really is getting these rise shapes right and getting the waistline shape right, so it creates that nice curve around the waist and really gets the, like, getting this shape of the back rise, front rise is, that is kind of like, that's the hardest part and the most important part. So I'm gonna also just play with the front rise a little bit. So one thing I would say too that I like to see generally is that the front rise comes to like a 90-degree angle from here to there. I want to see this portion be 90-degree angle. I also want to see a 90-degree angle here, so I would want to mess with this line so you get a 90-degree angle, because of course this seam is getting sewn to another front rise, so it's going to create this continuation of the front seam of the front waistline. So you want this to be a nice straight, like 90-degree angle, because otherwise you'll get a point up or a dip down, and you often see that on waistlines, and that's what that is. It's like just a kind of a little bit of a funky shape in the rise that could have been improved just with a slight tweak. So I like to make it a little bit of a 90-degree angle. You can see this sort of comes out. I like to scoop this area out a little bit. If you fill this in, it's kind of taking away space right there for your body. And sometimes I feel like you see that extra, it just, I find that a lot of people scooping out a little bit, it cleans up the front rise area. So I like to try to keep this like from here down, a really nice curve, and then, a really nice straight shape, and then a little curve. And then you can go down and then up, and you want to make sure right here is a 90-degree angle. So this is not a perfect pant by any means, but just, you know, a little example. And if you're just getting started with Accumark, I think playing with their blocks, it is a really great way to, you know, get your feet wet and play around a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add seam allowance to the rest of this pattern. And of course, I know this is still in millimeters or centimeters, not millimeters. I'm just going to pretend it's in inches, so I would just make it ½ inch. Pretty simple to add seam allowance. So you just select with your your left click, the normal click, and then right click OK. And then you can enter 0.5, and then you click OK. And when you're done with this, then you right click, cancel. So it's pretty much the same for almost all of the menu options there. It's you kind of have to like go back and forth between right click, left click, right click, left click, and then you have to cancel out when you're done, so you don't have to keep, so the prompting stops. But a good way to remember what you're supposed to do is just read this user input box. This is really going to be your key to telling you what you need to do next, everything like that. So it is really handy, and just look here if you're lost. Okay, so I think we're good here. No, am I sure? Yeah, I'm sure. I don't want to save these. Here are my curves. I'm not going to save that. All right, so maybe we can look at one other pant, since we've been talking about pants. Okay, so this is kind of a more normal looking pant. It's a little funky. I don't love how dramatic the shape is here. And you'll also see the seam allowance is on the inside of the piece. Everyone works a little bit differently, but Accumark is really set up to have that dotted line be on the outside. It's a little weird that their block pattern is set up this way. I feel a bit confused by this, but I'm gonna fix it. So let's see here. Modify. I want to swap those seams. I don't know where swap is. Is it here? Modify. Exchange an internal for a perimeter. No. I might have it somewhere here. Define seam swap, so cut. That's what it is. Okay, so select pieces to swap. And this is asking me about special corners. This pattern doesn't really have any special corners right now, so I don't think it matters. And grade rules, I'm just going to say ignore because I'm not worried about grading right now. So I'm just going to select the pieces. I'm selecting with my left click. And I'm going to right click, OK. And it says, may cause some grading to change. Sure, that's fine. And now you can see the dotted line is on the outside. Perfect. And now I can actually just turn it off. So when you're working on a pattern, and maybe some of you are experienced with this, but I always work on the sew line, not the cut line. I know some pattern makers work on the cut line. It's maybe a more traditional way of working, but to me, you're always thinking about what the finished garment should measure. So it makes sense to work on the sew line because the cut line is including that seam allowance. And that seam allowance might fluctuate depending on the machinery. You know, it's kind of subject to change. So to me, it doesn't make sense to think about the seam allowance or to include it when you're doing your pattern making. I think it's kind of one of those things you do last. It is, of course, really important, especially if you are making a pattern that you are having a sample room sew, or maybe you're sewing it, but I think it's sort of like the last thing you can do. And if you're making the sample yourself, I mean, you can just add 1/2 inch seam allowance all around and then, you know, decide what you want later if it's just a sample. But I think working on the sew line, that's kind of the way to go. And it definitely is the way Gerber is set up to work that way too. It has a lot of special seam corners you can do. Like you could do it's called the mitered corner or an envelope corner, which allows you to sew like corner seams, like at a hem, to be a little bit cleaner, sort of like the inside of a jacket. You can do little tapered corners, you can do turn back corners, all sorts of corners. And I wonder if I can find, modify, let's see here. I'm not sure where it might be under advanced. Nope. Verify? Okay, well, I'm going to find it one of these days, and I'll tell you. I'm usually working in 8.5, so working in 9 is a little funky for me. It takes me some time to remember what I'm doing. But yeah, so this to me looks like more of a typical pattern, like I said. And, oh, I don't want that to happen. Come back. All right, so let's flip him over. We can talk about him really quickly. Okay, I'm gonna hide the seams. And I'm just gonna zoom in. Okay. So now I think you can see a little bit better what I was saying in that last pant. Zoom out just a tiny bit. Oh, now it's too much. Perfect. So actually the difference is quite dramatic. You can see how these rises really don't see eye to eye. This one is way up here and this one's down here. But I would say a more hefty difference is going to be typical for a pair of pants. Of course, this depends so much on the size and the body shape and the styling of the pants. So I don't want to say that there's a hard rule of what kind of difference you need to see in this area. But I do think you should probably see a difference between your front rise and your back rise. It should be pretty obvious which one is which. So this one is a good example of that. I still think the rises look pretty short to me. This is like a low rise pant, I feel, but yeah, much more acceptable. It says this is a size 8. This looks like a little kind of a skinny size 8, but it does. You can see this is a much more generous rise area, a little more room in the back compared to that last one, which is kind of like it was very shallow back here. I might, I don't like seeing a diagonal line here into there because again, and maybe I can show this to you. So if you ever want to see something, you can just bring down another piece. Of course, the risk is that you save, you make an alteration and you save the wrong piece. So when you go to save, just make sure you delete that piece. But I'm going to flip it. And I will show you what I mean. So here, so now if I'm just going to get rid of this guy. He's out of the way. All right, so now if I rotate, where's my rotate? Here. All right, so choosing my, I'm going to rotate this guy. I'm going to select this point with my left point, and then again, this with my left. Oh, yeah, I didn't save it, so I forgot that this one has the seam allowance on the inside. Shoot, okay. You know what? Let me delete this from work area. Okay, first I'm going to press save. There we go. So now it's saved with the seam allowance on the inside. I'm sorry, on the outside. There we go. Yep, now they're both the same. So you can see I didn't save after I switched those seams, and that's why the other piece didn't match. Okay, and here we go. There we go. And I'm just going to drag that here, rotate. Okay, so now I think you can see what I mean. This is the front waistline, and you can see it comes to this V shape here at center front. You definitely don't want a V shape, which is why what's preferable is that you have a straight line or a 90-degree angle from this line and then down. So I'm going to show you something. If I click with both my left and my right mouse at the same time, it's called bunny ears, or some people call it that. It opens up this, it changes it from a mouse input to a value input. So I can say, all right, I'm okay with the length, but I want to make sure on the y-axis it's perfectly 0. So I'm just going to click apply and okay. Okay. And then let's zoom in here. So of course, for this to work, this needs to be straight and this needs to be perfect, like pretty straight up and down. And so what I would actually do from here to improve that waistline is I would simply, let's see here, where's the move point? Add point, delete point, move point. There we go. I would probably just take my front rise and snap it on there. I do not love the shape of this front rise, and part of it is because they are non-smoothing points. So that one's a smooth point. You can see an S. This one is not a smoothing point. It's pretty weird. I like to keep my points to a minimum. Like this isn't, it's definitely not necessary to, have so many points. I don't know what happened. I think I selected too many points. Let's try this again. There we go. I'm going to turn off the geometry here so I can just kind of eyeball this. I also think this is kind of a weird shape. It's sort of flat here. I guess I normally would have kind of a scoop and then more of the roundness would be at the bottom. Because when you think about it, like that's really how your rise is shaped. I think if it's too shallow here, you run the risk of it sort of riding up in the front, and you don't want that. You want to create space for the body so, you know, things are comfortable and they don't ride up. You definitely don't want some jeans riding up in the front or the back. So see, that's going to give you a nice smoother shape. And now we can, and when you sew the front rise together, it's going to be a straight, really nice line across the front waistline. And just to remind you, here's our old pattern. And let's see here. Realign grain. Okay, so I'm going to realign this piece. There we go. And now you can see the difference. I'm going to turn on the geometry, select that point, align it, and then I'm going to zoom in. See, now you can see the difference here, how much I scooped out. And it might seem like you're losing fabric, but another way to think of it is you're gaining space for the body. So this fabric is unnecessary. It's just gonna create, it's not giving space for the body. So this curve is actually allowing the front rise a place to go, and it's like the front of the body a place to go. So the shallower this space is and the less the less shape it has, really the less room it's giving the body to live in it, which is why I'm not wild about this shape. Maybe on a very small person who's very straight and doesn't have a lot of shapes, maybe they can get away with that. Maybe on a really stretchy fabric or sweatpants, you might be able to get away with this, but on a woven pair of pants, or honestly, I think on knits you do also see this, especially on like a yoga pant. You need those shapes. They might not have to be as big, but you really need them to be right, because otherwise you just get those extra fabric right where you don't want it. You never want extra fabric in the front rise. That's like the worst thing. It's like the thing everyone sees first. So getting this right is really important. All right, so I think I'm going to stop there for tonight. I hope you enjoyed this very casual video about Accumark version 9. Please leave me a comment. Let me know what you're hoping to learn, or if there's something I can help you get started with or answer questions on. Like I said, I've been using Accumark 8.5, and I recently started using 9. This is like an old computer that belonged to a friend of mine, but yeah, I've been using it for years and years, so hopefully I can answer your questions and get to the bottom of whatever it is you're working on. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.